In the mid-19th century, in the region of Santo Antonio, Lived, Colonel Ramiro Albuquerque, a respected and feared man, owner of the prosperous Fazenda Canaverde. His vast sugarcane fields swayed in the wind like a green sea, but they hid much pain and human sweat. Maria das Torres was one of the most dedicated slaves on the farm. At just 22 years old, her body was marked by the exhausting work of cutting sugarcane. Her brown eyes carried a deep sadness, but also a silent strength. Every day, from dawn until sunset, she cut the sharp canes that wounded her hands, carried heavy bundles on her back, and still helped with the grinding. Even in the midst of suffering, Maria das Torres dreamed of a better life. She dreamed of being free to have a life with dignity. It was in this context that she became involved with Joe Batista, the foreman of the farm. He promised protection and a different future. Sweet words that turned to ashes when she discovered she was pregnant. Upon learning of the pregnancy, Joe Batista reacted with coldness and cruelty. In front of the other workers, he publicly humiliated her. "This child is not mine. You must have slept with someone else. I want no responsibility for a slave's child. Get out of my sight." The words cut into Maria das Torres' heart like a sharp knife. She fell to her knees on the dirt ground, feeling such great pain that she could barely breathe. The other slave women looked on with pity, but no one dared to speak. That night, alone in the dark slave quarters, she cried until she had no more tears. The shame, abandonment, and fear of the future weighed on her chest like a huge stone. Months later, on a hot and stuffy night, Maria das Torres gave birth alone, with help only from an old midwife. When she held the little girl in her arms, she felt a love so strong it hurt. She named her Isabel, a name that meant consecrated to God. "My daughter, I will protect you with my own life," she whispered, kissing the newborn's forehead. Isabel grew up in her first 2 years between tears and her mother's affection. Maria das Torres worked even harder, but always reserved a moment to sing softly to her daughter and tell her stories of hope. However, Colonel Ramiro Albuquerque did not like problems on his farm. Upon discovering that the child was the foreman's daughter, he decided to get rid of the situation. On a gray day of light rain, he ordered the sale of Maria das Torres and the little Isabel. The cart arrived early. The mother hugged her daughter to her chest, her heart racing with despair. "Please, Colonel, don't take my daughter from me," she begged, kneeling at his feet. But the colonel was implacable. Joe Batista, the child's father, watched everything from afar, with a cold gaze, without lifting a finger to help. The pain of rejection repeated itself once again. The journey to Fazenda São Bento, in Cachoeira do Campo, was long and painful. The cart jolted along the bad roads. Maria das Torres protected Isabel from the rain and cold, singing to calm her, while silent tears ran down her face. She felt her heart broken, but she swore to herself that she would not surrender to despair. Upon arriving at the new farm, the overseer received them harshly, but Mrs. Teresa, the owner's wife, noticed Maria das Torres' suffering look and allowed her to work in the garden of the big house, away from the heaviest cutting. Isabel, still small, played among the coffee plants, while her mother, even exhausted, never stopped teaching her the value of courage, dignity, and faith. They were hard years. Maria das Torres worked from sunrise until sunset, but her love for her daughter was her greatest strength. She endured the humiliation of the past and the exhaustion of the present with her head held high. Isabel grew up observing her mother's strength, learning that even in the greatest pain, a woman can remain standing. The years passed like leaves in the wind through the coffee plantations. Isabel grew strong and beautiful. At 19 years old, her brown eyes carried her mother's sweetness, but also a determination that impressed everyone. She worked in the coffee harvest from early on, with skillful hands carefully separating the red beans. Despite the hard life, Isabel always had a gentle smile for the other workers and helped her elderly mother with tireless dedication. Maria das Torres now, with gray hair, watched her daughter with pride and concern. She knew that Isabel's beauty could bring dangers on a farm where the rules were harsh. That is why she repeated every day, "My daughter, keep your heart pure and your head held high. The world is cruel, but God sees everything." Eduardo Ferreira, the only son of Colonel Vicente, was a man different from most farmers of the time. At 28 years old, he had studied in Salvador and returned with ideas of justice and freedom that shocked his father. He spent long hours on the veranda of the big house, reading forbidden books and observing the work in the fields. It was there that he began to notice Isabel. At first, it was only admiration. He saw how she helped a fallen child, how she comforted a tired fellow worker, and how she cared for Maria das Dores with so much affection. Little by little, admiration turned into a deep feeling. Eduardo spent sleepless nights, struggling against his own thoughts. How could a man of his position love a slave? But his heart did not obey the rules of society. One day, during a strong storm, a heavy branch fell on Isabel while she was gathering coffee. Eduardo ran without thinking, pulling her from danger and carrying her in his arms to the big house. While treating her, he confessed what he had kept for so long. "Isabel, I can no longer hide it. Since I saw you grow up, my heart belongs to you. I don't see you as a slave. I see a worthy woman, courageous and full of light. I want to give you a new life, far from this pain." Isabel was pale. Tears rolled down her face. She remembered the rejection her mother had suffered and feared the same fate. "Mr. Eduardo, this is impossible. I am a slave. Your father will never allow it. The world will destroy us," she replied, her voice trembling. But Eduardo did not give up. For months, he fought in silence. He spoke with his father, who reacted with fury. "Have you gone mad? Marry a slave. This will tarnish the family name." Eduardo's mother, Mrs. Teresa, initially shocked, ended up being moved by her son's true love. She interceded in secret. Eduardo spent a large part of his inheritance to obtain the letter of freedom. There were days of tension, heated arguments, and threats of disinheritance. But his love was greater than fear. Finally, the day came. Isabel and Maria das Dores received their letters of freedom. The emotion was indescribable. Maria das Dores fell to her knees, kissing her daughter's hands and thanking God between sobs. "My daughter, you are free. After so much pain, you are free." The wedding was simple, held in the farm's garden, with few faithful witnesses. Isabel wore a simple white dress made by her mother. When Eduardo held her hand and said, "I promise to love and respect you every day of my life," Isabel felt that all the suffering of the past had been worth it. From then on, Eduardo transferred several coffee lands to Isabel's name, making her a respected property owner. Together, they began to change the farm. They reduced working hours, improved the workers' food, and dreamed of a fairer future. The love between them was pure, marked by absolute fidelity, long conversations at night, and daily complicity. Isabel blossomed. From a frightened young woman, she became a strong woman who managed part of the lands with intelligence and compassion. Maria das Dores, now free, lived in a comfortable little house and saw her daughter fulfilled. In the happiest moments, mother and daughter embraced and remembered the nights of crying in the slave quarters, thanking for the transformation. Eduardo and Isabel built a union based on respect, trust, and true love. Together they faced society's criticism, but nothing shook what they felt for each other. Years later, a great plague devastated the sugarcane plantations in several regions of Baja. The disease spread like fire, destroying entire fields. The famous Fazenda Canaverde, owned by the late Colonel Ramiro Albuquerque, was severely affected. The sugarcane withered, debts grew, and the property was put up for sale, along with all its slaves. And the old foreman Joe Batista, now an aged, sick, and bitter man. The news reached Isabel and Eduardo at Facendas Novento in Minas Gerais. Upon reading the letter, Isabella felt a strong tightness in her chest. Painful memories returned like an avalanche. Her mother's humiliation, her father's rejection, the rainy cart that took them away. Silent tears ran down her face. Eduardo, noticing her emotion, hugged her tenderly. "What do you want to do, my love? The decision is yours." Isabel took a deep breath, fighting against the resentment that still tried to rise. After an entire night of reflection, she made her decision. "Eduardo, that land carries my story and my mother's pain. Not for revenge, but to heal the past and build something new, with the prosperous fortune from the coffee fields, which miraculously were not affected by the plague." Eduardo bought Fazenda Cana Verde in Isabel's name. The trip back to Bahia was filled with expectation and emotion. Isabel held her mother's hand throughout the journey, remembering the stories of suffering. When they arrived at the old farm, the scene was one of sadness. The once green fields were dry and abandoned. The slaves looked fearfully at the new owner, Joe Batista, now weak and hunched, could barely raise his eyes. Upon recognizing Isabel, his face turned pale. Isabel approached him with firm steps, but without hatred in her heart. With a serene and dignified voice, she said, "The past no longer defines me. I could hate you for what you did to my mother and me, but I chose to forgive. May God give you the peace that you did not give us." Joe Batista fell to his knees, crying for the first time in many years, repentant too late. Maria das Dores, now elderly and frail, walked slowly to the place where she had given birth to Isabel. Seeing her daughter now as the owner of everything, she knelt on the dirt ground, touching it with her trembling hands, and cried tears of deep gratitude. Mother and daughter embraced for a long time under the same tree where Isabel had played as a child. The hug lasted minutes, full of sobs and words of love. "Mother, look where we have come," Isabel whispered. "Daughter, all the suffering, every tear was worth it," Maria das Dores replied, her voice choked with emotion. Eduardo and Isabel completely transformed the farm. They freed all the slaves immediately and created a fair work system, with wages and decent housing. Together, they rebuilt the fields with new resistant seedlings. The couple's union, based on absolute fidelity, respect, and true love, became an example for the entire region. Over time, happiness arrived in full. 3 children were born, filling the houses with laughter and play. Isabel, from a rejected slave, became a respected great landowner, but she never forgot her roots. Every night, she and Eduardo sat on the veranda, remembering the journey and thanking for every victory won with courage. Maria das Dores lived her final years in peace, surrounded by grandchildren and her daughter's love. Before departing, she held Isabel's hand and said, "You won, my daughter, not with hatred, but with love." The pain of the past had transformed into strength, and the farm that once represented suffering now flourished as a symbol of overcoming. The true triumph is not in never falling, but in rising with dignity even when the world tries to crush us. Isabel's story teaches us that pain can be fertile, that sincere love and fidelity build bridges that hatred can never tear down, and that the courage to forgive is the greatest act of freedom a person can achieve. It doesn't matter where we come from. What matters is where our heart takes us.